What?
The World Trade said that tower number 1 is on fire.
A plane crashed into the Pentagon just a little while after the two planes crashed into the two towers of the World Trade Center here in New York City.
2 World Trade just collapsed. Copy? Yeah, go ahead.
There are times in our lives that are life-changing, where your life can never be the same, and this appears certainly to be one of them.
What happened, but we're just trying to figure out what they're doing. We're just bringing equipment right now. Attack the house!
As soon as I saw those towers hit the ground, I knew I had to do something. I had to give back to my country and help out in any way I could.
Go 53! Go! 53!
Becoming a Marine on September 11th, America is fused with me now. It's who I am. It's part of me now. You know, that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, it means something to every Marine, but when getting it on something as big as September 11th, it's personally life-changing.
Come Marines, right? Yes, sir! What we gotta do here, snap? Yes, sir! Little hike down the hill, little motivating cadence, open your mouths, your snap. Yes, sir!
The pain in your legs on the first hill was horrible, but you just keep pushing through, knowing that you're going to be part of something that's greater than anything you'll ever know. The Marine Corps is the biggest brotherhood you can become a part of. That the men you go through boot camp with, the men you train with in SOI, they're part of your family for the rest of your life. It's a small community of the Marine Corps, and the friends you make are lifelong friends, and the brotherhood has already started.
Continue to be strong. You can make it. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
You can make it. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Congratulations.
All right, sir.
Being able to receive the badge of a Marine on the same day that so many people lost their lives due to an atrocious attack, being able to know that at some point I might be able to help avenge that attack was a great honor for me. And it's the first time I shed a tear at boot camp was hearing that pause of silence for the 9/11 victims.
Patriotism, I would define as the ultimate sacrifice for your country. Just being able to stand up for what's right, having moral courage to push through all the obstacles that's in your country's way, and to fight for your country and your family and your friends.
There's going to be a payback. We were going to go after these people that hit us. It was only a matter of when and where and how soon.
You know your cause is righteous. You essentially feel privileged that you're going to get the opportunity to hit back, on America's behalf. And that was pretty much the general feeling amongst the Marines. We came in, set up our little portion of our forward operating base, and then began planning for subsequent operations. The first night that we went out on an interdiction op, we ended up having enemy contact and destroying a Taliban convoy that was moving that particular night. The night that we seized the Kandahar airfield, that was an interesting night. It was pretty dark, and the movement from where we were in an unpopulated area to just to the outskirts of Kandahar was uneventful. It got a little different when we actually started to move through the city. It was literally almost impossible to tell who was a good guy and who was a bad guy. So everywhere you looked as we were making this movement, you saw folks in alleyways, on rooftops, around corners. They all were armed. The city was very poorly lit, and it had an eerie feel to it. An Army Special Forces team that was working with anti-Taliban forces had gotten in a fight with some Taliban and al-Qaeda folks that were in and around the airfield. Essentially what we ended up doing is going to all the known al-Qaeda sites that were in the area, establishing perimeters around them and exploiting them for anything that we possibly could. Finding ammunition stores, finding weapon stores, and essentially, detonating all that stuff.
We had come out from Afghanistan, the fighting there. We'd gotten the word we were going into Iraq. We were going into Al-Anbar province, the Sunni Triangle. This was the heart of the enemy's insurgency. But when there's tough fighting to be done, that's where the Marine Corps goes. It doesn't go to the easy fight, it goes to the tough one. We'd have Marines getting ready to attack into Fallujah, who, when one Marine expressed some concern what it was going to be like, his squad leader said, "Don't worry about it, we took Iwo Jima, we can take Fallujah." As the strengths of the Marine Corps came through loud and clear to the young guys who would have to do all the heavy lifting in this fight.
Target!
My own Alpha Command Group, my Jump CP that went everywhere with me, was 29 young sailors and Marines, communicators, crewmen of the light armored vehicles, and of those 29, 17 were killed or wounded. So we saw what the young infantrymen were going through. I never had to say anything twice. When it was time to move against the enemy, they always moved swiftly. They moved without hesitation. They were smart, and they used supporting fires very, very well. They called for support when they needed it. Every day it was an inspiration to be with them. I considered it a privilege just to serve alongside these young guys. They had joined the fight, and they were out to prove they were as good as the Marines who'd gone before them.
People are changed by a wartime experience. Some certainly more than others. Certainly some Marines and sailors will experience a higher level of intensity than others, but I think it changes us all. People get hurt, people get killed. Sometimes there's no rationale or no obvious reason as to why one person dies and another person walks on. So I think you have to contemplate your mortality at some point in time.
The relationships they had with one another were not just important, but everything. It superseded anything else that they were dealing with. They have the unit cohesion or the sense of togetherness that manages to give them strength even in very difficult situations. In other situations, that's really difficult because if they lose a brother or a sister out there, it is a level of devastation unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I think the grief of that loss is so intense and continues to be. It was out there and continues to be in my work now. It hasn't changed, it's the same. When I came home from Iraq, I know I was not myself. I cried when things weren't sad. I couldn't cry when they were sad. I felt like I was sort of upside down. I couldn't sleep and had pretty disturbing dreams and crazy images I couldn't get out of my head. So for the first time as a psychologist, I actually really experienced some of these symptoms that my patients tell me about.
The Marine and the sailor corpsman mentality is to just, you have to keep going. You have to keep the mission on track, and you have to do what you have to do in order to complete that mission, in order to take care of your Marines, in order to get the job done.
One of the ways that we dealt with a lot of things that were going on over there is we kind of compartmentalized everything. Issues going on with our families, we kind of put aside. Certain feelings we had, we definitely had to put those aside so we could get our missions done. And so very much we had to put blinders on.
Because if you don't, then you're just going to be thinking about all the stuff that you had to see or had to do, and it'll affect your mission, and it might affect other people who are with you. So you can't dwell on it while you're there because it's not healthy and safe for anyone.
We compartmentalize very well when we have to get the job done. And we have to do this. This is a really logical thing that human beings do when they've been through something traumatic. They put it away. They finish the job. And then it's much later that they might experience some of the complications from the fact that they avoided dealing with it.
You just act differently. You're a different person when you're in combat and called to do different things and very difficult things. So you have to keep your eyes on the prize and just keep going and stay on those convoys and stay on those missions, because that's what's going to get you back home alive.
But there's really no way around that. We have to avoid dealing with it at the time. We don't have time to stop.
It's not new. I mean, if you study the Civil War, there were experiences that were had there by the veterans of the war that impacted them in ways until they went to their grave. The veterans of World War II, you know, the most common thing we say is that they don't like to talk about it. Well, my view is perhaps, and my father was one of those, my view is perhaps that's how they deal with it. Because I think regardless the war, probably regardless the nation, combat veterans are going to have this experience. They're going to have those memories. They're going to have those flashbacks. They're going to have these experiences that cause you to lose sleep, do some strange things, and otherwise just not be yourself. So it is a natural human emotion.
War is war. And so you cannot go through this experience without being changed. One of my personal problems with this is that it's hard to communicate it. Not only does it change you, it creates a very difficult circumstance to explain to others. And it can at times feel isolating when you come out of this because you cannot explain it to others. But it is simply one of the manifestations of something that is so emotionally compelling as you go in through an experience like this that leaves you changed forever.
What most people don't realize is that when you go through an intensely stressful experience, such as engaging in combat, the brain and the body respond in a very intense physiological way. Your stress alarm system is activated, which floods the body with adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. These hormones help you to deal with the threat. It increases blood sugar level and oxygen throughout the body. But they also affect different regions of the brain. So it's a very intense physiological event. And so many people feel like they shouldn't have any response to a stressor. They shouldn't have symptoms. They see that as a sign of weakness. But in fact, you can't control what your body and brain does during a really traumatic or stressful event.
Combat changes everyone. It doesn't matter who you are or what you did. The experience will change you. The question is how. So I think that as I help patients deal with post-combat trauma now, that's part of my job, is to help them figure out how they were changed and how sometimes that change can be in the form of damage or a negative effect, and other times it can be positive. It can be post-trauma growth, if you will, the ability to make you into something stronger. And I believe everyone is affected somehow, but it will look different from person to person.
I wasn't sleeping at all, you know, like I would just do round the clock.
When I would try to go to sleep, I wake up like every 45 minutes to an hour. It was like every hour was the same thing. Because I don't know if it was because of the weird dreams I was having, because I was having some weird, crazy dreams that I never had before.
Common reactions to combat stress are feeling more anxious or irritable, starting to feel down, trouble sleeping, feeling kind of numb or detached, withdrawing from buddies, intrusive memories or nightmares of some combat experiences. So all of these are common responses to a severely stressful situation. And most people will experience them for at least a few days after a really serious event. If, however, the symptoms persist for more than a couple of weeks, it's really important that they go and talk to their buddies or superior officer to make sure that they get some help.
Both times when I came back, I didn't feel safe in my own house. I didn't feel safe really anywhere.
I get a lot more aggressive now than I used to.
A miscommunication, instead of it just being a miscommunication, blows up into something much more. We almost start a physical fight over it.
When you get back home, definitely, it's a big shocker. You know, things are not the same anymore, and the rush is not there anymore, and you start thinking about the things you did there and start analyzing some of the stuff that happened and the friends you lost and the people that got hurt in the way. And that's when you start having problems and you start thinking about why am I feeling like this?
You would think that coming home would be the easy part, but for many people it's not. It's actually a really difficult part. They find themselves having a lot of trouble transitioning to the pace of civilian life, to the people, and especially those that don't understand what they might have just been through. For sort of the triviality of certain parts of life, things that people worry about here feel really trivial when you've just come out of the combat zone.
It was very, very different, the way that I felt and some of the reactions that I was getting from my own family. And I was like, nobody else can understand what I'm thinking or how I feel right now.
I just retreated. I think just telling people that, you know, this makes me feel uncomfortable, it's not something that I do. So I would just keep my mouth shut.
When I first returned from Iraq, I had a really difficult time transitioning back to a peacetime hospital where I took care of people who had not deployed to Iraq. And after taking some leave, I returned to my first day of clinic, and something very heavy, like a big steel case of some sort, bookcase or filing cabinet, fell to the floor on the deck above me. And when that happened, a very loud boom sort of resonated through my office and shook the windows in their sills. I knew logically that I was in the hospital in the States, that no one was shooting at us. There were no rockets exploding nearby, and yet my body responded in this really intense way. So I started to walk back into my office, and one of our very junior corpsmen saw me, and he walked up to my office door and he said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, I'm fine." And he said, "Okay," and he walked into my office and he closed the door behind him and he pointed at my couch and said, "Have a seat," which I did. And he said, "Ma'am, you know, it's okay if you're not okay." And I looked at him and I said, I'm not okay. And he said, "I know." And I use that line now all the time because it made so much sense to me. It was the act of giving permission for someone who has never experienced this really difficult moment of having to realize that you actually might be suffering from something. It gave me permission to feel that. And it was incredibly important. And I feel like that's our biggest job now, is to give each other permission that it's okay.
Hey, that's my hat. You better get that hat back.
Obviously, the interpersonal part of reconnecting is always going to be difficult. It's such a different world, and I think people say that's where they really see it, is with their families, because the worlds just seem so disconnected.
When I came home, I didn't notice anything different with me. It was my family, my friends, and after I got diagnosed, when they were just like, we didn't really want to say anything because we didn't want you to think we were looking at you differently.
A lot of Marines worry about traumatizing their families, or that it might be a situation that's so foreign that their wife or husband might not understand. But I tell them, at least give that person the benefit of knowing generally where you're coming from. And I tell spouses, be patient. This is going to take time. Continue to say whatever you're going through is okay. And if you continue that tact, very likely he or she will come around.
The hardest thing I had to do, even harder than probably the actual events themselves, were ask for help. But at the same time, once I did that, it was, I felt very relieved, very fortunate to find out that there was help available, and that I wasn't alone in this process. Once I was able to understand that, I felt so much better.
Just a week ago, I'm sitting in a senior enlisted conference, with senior sergeants major. And one senior sergeant major stood up and said, look, I never knew that I had combat operational stress until 2 weeks ago. My wife had been noticing the changes in me, and she said, I think it's something wrong. So he went to the doctor, and he found out that he had combat operational stress. But this is senior sergeants major that's openly saying this, so they're telling Marines that it's okay. So, I mean, that is a great example for them to set.
Some folks will say that, well, it's good for everyone else. You know, I've taken care of my family or my country or whatever, but you know, my life sucks. Okay. That too is a signal that one needs help, because your life is fundamentally good too. And life holds tremendous things in store for you. But it requires that perseverance through the darkness into the light, into the good times.
I definitely feel a lot better. I feel better physically. I feel better mentally. I realize that it's okay to have certain emotions, or in fact to have all emotions. It's okay to have those. And different ways to act when I have those emotions. And it sounds very elementary that I would have to basically relearn how to use the emotions correctly, but that's kind of what it gets down to. Is it's okay to be angry. Now, what do I do now that I am angry? Well, or it's okay to show people that I'm happy. Now, how do I do that?
It's very difficult for all of us in our military family to look insightfully at ourselves and know when we're struggling or when we're suffering or when we're not ourselves. That's really difficult to do. And so asking our Marines and sailors to self-refer for combat stress is asking a lot, that it's our responsibility to look at each other and look at those people that you know pretty well. And if they start to look different to you, if he or she doesn't seem like himself or herself, that's the time to let that person know. It's okay. It's okay if you're not okay.
We just briefed the president, and I emphasized to him the importance of United States Marine Corps small unit leadership. And how very, very proud we are of the fact that these guys have responded almost uniformly to the requirements of this long war. It is essential that we support each other. Our officers and our sergeants have got to be that point in the formation where they look for combat stress, they recognize it for what it is, and then they do something about it. And that doing something about it is helping that Marine. There is no shame in experiencing combat stress because you are in combat. What matters is that Marines take care of each other.
Small unit leaders need to ensure that they engage back in peacetime as far as combat operational stress the same way they train Marines up for combat. When they get back, they need to notice if it's any changes in their Marines as far as combat operational stress. And then they take the steps to get them help so we can get them back in the fight. And we sending that message out throughout the Marine Corps. Our Commandant has really pushed that message out, saying it's okay to come forward. It would not affect their records. It would not affect their career in the Marine Corps. And we need to ensure that we constantly tell Marines that and get that message out. And we need to follow through on that. It's easy to say, but we need to follow through to show Marines that it's okay to come forward. And we're doing that every day in the Marine Corps.
I had the privilege of serving alongside you in fights in Afghanistan and in Iraq on the attack into Baghdad and Tikrit, and of course in Al Anbar province and many fights since that time. And I want to talk to you for just a minute about combat stress. You know I'm a very proud Marine. We all are. You know I'm an infantryman, and I'm proud to be a Marine infantryman. But you would consider me crazy if when we went into a fight I didn't call for Marine air support and Marine artillery support. That's the way Marines fight, always supporting one another, whether it be on the ground or with fire support. Combat is a very, very challenging environment. You know that, and I know that. And for those of you who've fought the close-in fights, who've seen your buddies hurt or lost, those of you who've carried away these same experiences of the Marines who took Iwo Jima, you know they stay with you a long time. They don't necessarily go into your dim memory. They stay very fresh as you look back on those days. And it's critical that if you or your shipmate, your buddy, is having a tough time, you've got to have the guts to come in and ask for support. Just like I ask for air support when I go into a fight, you need to be able to ask for the same kind of counseling support or take care of your buddy if you see he's having a tough time, and you can't turn the other way and ignore it on yourself. Your family will pay if you do. You can't turn and look the other way if your buddy is having a tough time, because you don't want to live with the consequences of him not being able to handle this. So I'd suggest to you that if you look back in history, if you look at Iwo Jima and remember those boys coming off the island, they'd had a tough time too. They felt pretty rough about it. And if we can help one another through this, that's our duty. Marines are not victims. If you feel like this is too tough, then you've got to make the choice to do something about it. Marines make choices, and let's make good choices. Let's help each other through this. And remember, nothing's worse than Iwo Jima. Whatever you're going through, Marines made it through before. They often needed help from one another, but they made it. And you've got a good life in front of you. You and I know how precious life is after what we've been through. So do the right thing, make the right choice, support one another, support your family, and take care of yourself.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight